The next fireside panel discussion dives into some of the geography-agnostic health tech opportunity areas, digital transformation strategy, and emerging applications of deep tech to serve fundamental and future needs. Our moderator for this session is Nitin Varshni, Director of Products at Optum Global Solutions. Nitin leads product management and strategy teams at Optum India for US healthcare payer and provider line of businesses in both clinical as well as non-clinical healthcare spaces. Over to you, Nitin.
Thank you, Chintan. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to an amazing expert health tech panel on building global health tech products. First, I would like to call upon Rakesh Barve. Rakesh is Senior Vice President of Data Science at Entrance, where for the last few years, leveraging longitudinal EMR data of all types from leading medical centers, he works on the development of multimodality AI algorithms for helping predict and diagnose the onset of disease and large-scale analytic systems that enable clinical and biopharma research. Next, I would like to call upon Dr. Sujoy Kar. Sujoy is Chief Medical Information Officer and the Vice President of Apollo Hospitals. Previously, Medical Director of Apollo Gleneagles Hospitals, Kolkata. He is clinical microbiologist by background. He is adjunct faculty for healthcare analytics and management at IIM Calcutta and IIT Kharagpur. His current and ongoing research interests are in the development and adoption of artificial intelligence in healthcare and digital health platforms. Rakesh and Sujoy, welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for taking out time this morning. I look forward to spending next 30 minutes or so discussing with you some of the key aspects of health tech industry that can help product professionals towards building world-class healthcare products from India and shape the future of healthcare globally. Rakesh, let me start with you first on your thoughts on building products and platforms by leveraging AI, ML, and other emerging technologies and developing and deploying it in various geographies. For health tech leaders and startups trying to build geography-agnostic health tech capabilities, please share your thoughts based on your rich experience in this space. What challenges you faced when deploying health tech products to various countries, and any best practices you would suggest they should keep in mind as they pursue various healthcare markets?
Great. Thanks, Nitin, for the introduction, and thank you, NPC, also for this opportunity to speak on AI in healthcare. It's a great question. I think anyone building AI solutions for healthcare ought to be familiar with the nuances of the healthcare industry in different geographies. Let's take the US first, which is the biggest healthcare market in many sense. Now in the US, all patient care, not all, but a bulk of the patient care costs are borne by insurance companies, either government insurance or employer-based private insurance companies. What this actually means is that that once you have an clinically effective algorithm, and as well as you're able to show that your algorithm or system or solution is aligned to like a reimbursement code from the insurance industry, then there is a set way for hospitals and doctors to use your solution and open yourself up to some revenue streams. So take, for instance, let's say you have a diagnosis algorithm based on AI for a certain kind of cancer, or let's say you have an AI system for remote monitoring of patients. So typically you would have to establish the clinical effectiveness of the system, and we'll talk about how to do that. You would also have to establish the economic effectiveness of the system. And once these are in place, then you will be able to be in a position to get a reimbursement code from insurance. And that means that a hospital system can do a cost-benefit analysis on your system and make way for using your system during actual patient care. Now, establishing clinical effectiveness involves a few steps. So firstly, you have to build an algorithm and if it's an AI algorithm, it's going to be using patient data. So you have to typically work with a research-oriented hospital system in the US. You have to be paying attention to things like patient privacy and data security needs while building your AI. You have to test that your algorithm actually works, then you have to typically get like an FDA approval if you want to be deployed in clinical settings. Getting an FDA approval means a few steps. So firstly, you have to meet up with the FDA and agree to a clinical validation protocol, which typically means that a certain number of patients, a certain outcome in terms of sensitivity and specificity of your algorithm, this is agreed upon by you and the FDA. And then you go back to your partner hospital system so that you can actually now start getting data from third-party sites and get data, patient data, again, with full respect to all privacy laws and so on. So you get third-party data which your algorithm has not seen during the development of the algorithm. And then you get a third-party statistician who will, in an unbiased way, take your algorithm, take the data, run the analysis as per the agreed to protocol, and submit to the FDA. And assuming everything goes well, you do get an FDA approval. Now that's, while an FDA approval is necessary, it's not sufficient, because you still have to establish like the clinical effectiveness in a real world setting. So typically this may entail, again, doing a systematic study, which involves a prospective analysis where you are able to show that in the real world, basis your algorithm, doctors who have your system, your AI system, have better patient outcomes compared to doctors who don't. Once this is established, you have to establish the economic effectiveness of your system, meaning you have to establish that, you know, when patients use your algorithm or your system, it results in a lesser burden on the healthcare costs compared to you know, patients who don't get the benefit of your algorithm and system. So that's kind of how you would do it in the US. So it's a fairly structured way, and it's a huge market, so huge opportunities. Now, if you look at EU or UK, typically that there is a government agency that is looking into both the hospital system as well as the insurance system. So often, you know, it can be a little more structured approach to, so you still have to establish clinical effectiveness, you still have to establish economic effectiveness. But for instance, NHS has a program specially for startups, wherein in areas of interest to NHS, they actually go out and try to meet startups. And if they select you, they actually pay you to work with some hospitals in their domain. And you get, within these hospitals, you'll get clinicians who will work with you and champion you. They'll help you do these studies in a systematic fashion to, again, establish clinical effectiveness and also economic effectiveness. And once this works out, then you actually can get deployed on the NHS system at scale. And the same, I suppose, works even for EU. In the context of India, insurance penetration is not so much. And a large part of the patient care costs are borne out of pocket very often by the patient. So the AI developer, of course, we still have to get you know, approval from the equivalent of FDA in India, which is the CDSCO. They typically ask you to get a CE certification, and that entails sort of clinical validation, which you study, which you have to perform with a third party and submit it. And you get this CE approval. But what you end up having to do is having to convince hospitals and doctors of the effectiveness of your solution. And that may, again, entail study and iterations. And once you have that, then the doctors and hospitals can recommend your AI system to be used. And because it's the patient who will finally bear the costs out of pocket.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rakesh. This was really pragmatic and real world, you know, kind of, you know, insights and, you know, experience you shared. Coming to you, Sujoy, healthcare industry is now actively talking about the fifth healthcare aim of advancing health equity. I know you're passionate about health equity, so therefore the question, you know, basically to reduce health disparities related to discrimination or exclusions based on racial identity, socioeconomic status, disabilities, gender, age, etc. How do you see technology helping healthcare industry in making strong progress towards health equity, along with the quadruple aim of healthcare, which is access, quality, cost, and experience? Sujoy.
Thank you, Nitin, for this question. I think what Prashant was talking in the previous session and what Rakesh just explained are very fundamental in going about how do we go and bring AI or other technologies into the clinical workflow. And we have been doing this in Apollo. We have been able to design, develop, deploy, validate several of these algorithms, and which are now being used in several healthcare institutions and countries over the world. However, I love to talk about design and how do you go about in designing these solutions in a way which is equitable, which is meaningful, which reaches to the last mile. So my answer to this question broadly would come with 4 points. And the first point is, look at the data that you have. Begin with the data that you have, wherein you, particularly at the data, you would have to look at how you settle or balance between the elements that bring in the bias in your technology or bring in the bias in your, particularly in AI solutions, looking at ethnicity, looking at geographic variations, looking at temporal variations of the time, or even if you're in clinical sense, if your data is streaming from a particular device, and then how do you go and make it interoperable towards the several devices that would actually collect the data, whether you are doing a validation or whether you are doing in some sort, a prospective use. So those are the first fundamentals of looking at how you design the technology in an equitable fashion. The second point is the suitability perspective. And I bring the suitability perspective from our the framework that we have designed on what we call as the E's, which is ethics, adoption, suitability, and explainability in developing the technologies that we do at Apollo hospitals. And one of the questions that we have in the suitability framework is actually to understand what is the problem that you are trying to solve, and what exactly, how are you going to integrate this into a workflow. That is something that you have to bear in mind. You would also have to bring in the perspective that what would actually work and what would not work on a clinical field. Understanding that is a very important element. Prashant was talking about several systems in which you bring edge devices near to a particular, imaging equipment, and then you go about in getting the results out of it. But what is the importance is how many people would be able to afford them? If you are doing an AI based on cloud, when you take it to the last mile, how many people have the access to internet? How would you design solutions where you do not have an access to internet and you are able to take it to the periphery? So those are the kind of things you bring into that. The third point itself is about the designing it for the last mile, isn't it? To understanding the gap, to understanding the to bring in the concepts of design thinking, and more importantly about systems thinking into it, where you are looking at the attitude of the people who are going to use it, the behavior as to how they will respond to the technology, and then how are you meeting their expectations when it comes to using it in the clinical field are very, very important. And then look at it from the proposition that you are building with adoption in mind. I know that there is a very cumbersome process of going through the, first the certification, validation, and then moving on to, the regulatory clearances and all of that. But at the end of the day, if your solution is going to give a impetus onto the clinical adoption, it is going to make a lot of changes. And lastly, you have to see how you go about in engaging it for better, improving the experience, improving the outcomes for the patients of the last mile that you are working for.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sujoy. I think the importance of design thinking, systems thinking, some of the frameworks which you are using at Apollo hospitals. Thank you for sharing all of that and how it kind of can help dealing with the health equity related challenges. Thank you for sharing that. Coming back to you, Rakesh, a lot of startups are today looking at leveraging data and analytics for solving some of the fundamental and future healthcare problems. You have successfully led AI-driven products that is helping providers in early diagnosis of chronic diseases. What are some of the possible areas that you foresee emerging technologies, including AI, ML, AR, VR, etc., like that will play a key role in shaping the future of healthcare across countries? Also, if you can touch upon the latest, interest area, the impact of 5G on healthcare, that would be great, Rakesh.
Great. So AI, as you can work on all kinds of data. So especially all kinds of clinical data too. So you can have data which is in the form of patient notes. When you look at retrospective patient information, you can have radiology images, pathology images. There are lab tests, and there's molecular profiles increasingly now of patients. So there exists AI application which can use each one of these data modalities, and more interestingly also combine these modalities in the sense that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So suppose you're diagnosing a disease, you may often be able to take two modalities, and if you have an AI system that uses them meaningfully, you can have better outcomes than each of the individual modalities. So in terms of applications, we've talked about a little bit about diagnosis, right? So early diagnosis, early detection, and especially if you're able to do it using some of the newfangled devices. I think the Intel presenter talked about the AliveCore device. It's a small portable ECG device. So if you can imagine, you can do early diagnosis using any of these modalities, and especially if you have things like portable devices which can even be used in remote locations, and that's where things like 5G will be useful to carry the image or data from a remote location to some cloud-based server. So diagnosis of diseases and even prediction of onset, sometimes within a few months of using the AI algorithm can be done. This is possible. We have seen results in oncology, in cardiology, in autoimmune diseases, as well as even metabolic diseases. So besides early diagnosis and detection, there's also nowadays the prevalence of AI-assisted procedures. So you can have surgeries that can be conducted with the help of to different levels of AI. It's not quite like fully automated, probably, but surgeries can be assisted, in terms of where to do an incision and things like that using AI. And that's where some of this AR, VR stuff, as you can imagine, can come in, because you can have a immersive experience. Maybe the surgeon can to guide the surgeon while he or she is conducting the surgery. One more use case in this assisted procedure stuff is sometimes you want to take do a genetic sequence of some very specific part of a biopsy, and often you use AI, histopathology AI, to decide which part you should scrape to do the sequencing, because two very adjacent parts of the same organ may, only one part may have the mutation that you're interested in, and the neighboring may not have. So besides these kind of applications, there's also remote ICU. I think one of the previous speakers mentioned. You can imagine all the vitals of a lot of patients going up to the cloud, and with a reduced number of healthcare staff, you're able to monitor patient health. And there's also patient monitoring applications where, let's say, using a portable or a wearable device, maybe even after a patient has been discharged from the hospital, or he's under some medication, but maybe at home. Hospitals are thinking of how to extend to home, hospital care to the home. So remote monitoring applications are again possible with AI. Besides all this, there is, at least in terms of geographies which spend a lot of money in pharma R&D, like the US, Europe, increasingly so even in places like India, there's Japan and Korea. There are pharma applications which range from clinical trial recruitment, that is, making it efficient to decide whether or not someone meets the inclusion or exclusion criteria of a clinical trial. That can be AI assisted. And of course, AI is also useful in early drug discovery. I mean, we all know of results from DeepMind where they're able to use neural networks to solve some protein folding problems which have been hitherto unsolved till recently. Besides protein foldings, there's AI used to figure out which mutations are actually actively responsible for some disease condition or some pathology in a cell. There's also drug target kind of problems which can be solved by AI. In terms of in India, as far as I know, one very successful AI application has been in the context of infectious diseases. So there's an Indian startup company which has been able to successfully leverage CSR and other sort of non-profit revenue streams, but very successfully in attacking TB, early diagnosis of TB. So in general, I think pretty much every area in healthcare and medicine, right from pharma to actual clinical care, remote monitoring, remote care is open to be solved by AI. And AI, when I say AI, it's always something that assists a physician. We are pretty far from like anything remotely looking like fully automated AI.
Wonderful. It's so fascinating to even understand what all emerging technologies can do to solve some of the really massive healthcare challenges and problems. So thank you, Rakesh, for kind of giving some of the examples and some of the areas where it can really do wonderful job, especially in the clinical area where you are focused. So thank you, Rakesh. Sujoy, based on your deep medical and technology background, what opportunity areas you would like to highlight to our audience that are available for health tech players to pursue that can accelerate the digital transformation in any country's healthcare industry, Sujoy?
Yeah, I mean, whether you look at it from the perspective of digital transformation or for that matter, AI transformation, which are now more and more happening around the world. So the first and foremost thing that you need to look at is what is your operational backbone? What you promise digitally, how do you fulfill this on an operational scale? And that is very important because, you're dealing with human lives, you're dealing with decisions which will impact human lives. And therefore, there is a requirement that whatever you do through technology has to be fulfilled operationally on the ground. And also bringing in the concepts that I just spoke about in the previous answer. And then the second thing is when you do that, you generate a lot of data. How are you using that data to share the insights with the clinicians, with the providers, with the patients at some point of time to actually leverage in their own health decision-making or clinical decision-making. So this is very important that there is a stream about how you are leveraging shared insights from this. The third is how do you build on a more effective health platform in your own right? And how do you bring in the network effects, positive network effects by bringing in multi-sided platform, in the multi-sided platform, the different players that would come in and get the maximum benefit of it. And you get into a way by which there is a continuous positive network effect, which would help to actually grow your platform and take it to higher levels. So in doing so, in all of these 3 points, what you have to look at as the fourth strategy is what is your accountability framework? How do you balance between what we call as the autonomy versus your ability to invent, your ability to go about in thinking and designing things better. So you have to find a sweet spot where you have the best of the balance between the two when you are looking at digital transformation. Fifth, and one of the last points is about how do you then look at in bringing these together and make an interdependence on this. Interdependence of what you plug and play from other sources and do that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sujoy. I think the accountability framework you spoke about really is important there. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on digital transformation strategies there. I think probably what we can do now is, we can, I would like to request both of you to take a couple of minutes each for your closing remarks for this session. And then we can kind of, see if there are any questions or, towards the end of the session. We can start with you, Sujoy, and then we can come back to you, Rakesh, for your closing remarks.
Yeah, I think this is a very exciting space for us at this point of time. We are evolving in this, but we would also have to look at certain factors like bringing AI as a complement or technologies as a complement to the clinical field. We also have to look at how we improve our computing power and then see for the state-of-the-art machines that are coming in our way in next few years.
Wonderful. Rakesh?
Yeah, so, as someone who's been working only for the last few years in this space, I've been working with some great physicians. And I feel that this combination of physicians and say engineers trying to solve a problem it throws up some really fascinating and challenging possibilities. So there are two aspects to this. One is the science itself. I mean, biology. When I want to hire someone really badly, I tell them this, that, when you were conceived by your parents, you were one cell with some DNA, and that same thing has become you. And really speaking, we have no idea exactly in some mechanistic, it sounds like magic, but of course it's some mechanistic thing, and we have no idea how that works. We have no idea how the same DNA in your eye helps you see, and your same DNA in your heart makes the heart pump blood, and so on. So unraveling these mysteries of biology, I think, cannot be done without AI and combining with physicians. So in some sense, just like last century was the unraveling of physics, this century is going to be the unraveling of biology. The second aspect is, of course, the service aspect. I mean, as engineers, we get a direct chance to actually impact the quality of life of patients in a meaningful way. It's tremendously gratifying to think about, like, some system that you've built actually, maybe improve the quality of life for someone, maybe extended someone's life. So I think these two aspects are a very fascinating aspect of this field. And third is, like, there's a business challenge. There are so many stakeholders. There's hospitals, there's doctors, there's insurance companies, and of course, at the center of it all is the patient. And how to build, how to engineer a system that works well and also makes economic sense so that it's a win-win for all. It's a great challenge.
Wonderful. Unraveling the mysteries of biology is, like, the line I take from that. And thank you for both of you for your closing remarks. I do have a couple of questions over here coming from the audience. The first one is, what are the certifying bodies in India for medical device certifications and health tech devices similar to FDA and HIPAA compliance process in United States?
So my understanding is there's an organization called the CDSCO, which is equivalent to the FDA. And it's only very recently that software as a medical device as a category became listed in the CDSCO scope. And you need to get, as I understand it, equivalent of a CE mark in order to be able to use your device in India. If it's for screening applications, the requirements are a little less, rigid or compared to if you're actually going to use it for diagnosis or treatment. But probably Dr. Sujoy has a better sense.
Sujoy, I think you're on mute. Okay, sounds good. And I think the next question probably was also, probably we can start with you, Rakesh, and then we can go to Sujoy, is, what are the, like, couple of top, provider or doctors problem, which the startups and the, the health tech companies in India should focus on for solving? Like, are there any couple of suggestions, like top suggestions?
So I don't know specifically about India, but when you're building AI algorithms, you need something called the ground truth, right? And now the ground truth, because it's only when you teach the AI what is the ground truth that the algorithm learns. Now, getting the ground truth, there can be different ways of getting the ground truth. So one is when you actually have physicians or experts annotate the data. And that's kind of an expensive way to do it. A more scalable way potentially is if you have like 360-degree data, not just say the X-ray image, but let's say you also have like the MRI or CT scan of the same patient at the same time, then you can maybe even automate the process of getting ground truth. So this is one scalable problem. Another problem is I spoke to a top neurosurgeon, and he, when we are talking about this AI algorithm, I think Prashant from Intel was talking about this brain tumor segmentation. So his first take was, you know what, this ground truth is something I don't completely buy this ground truth. As in, I'm not fully convinced about the annotated data itself. For me, the only ground truth is survival. Like how long after this stage of glioblastoma does the patient survive? So I think this ground truth, how to establish ground truth, which you can teach AI, and get the buy-in of the physicians, that's a pretty interesting and challenging problem to solve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rakesh. Looks like Sujoy is having technical difficulty here. So thank you so much, both of you, Rakesh and Sujoy, for an extremely engaging and informative session with great insights on all the topics we touched upon. And these are all really the forward-looking health tech topics our audience is looking for insights. This is great value to our 2022 NPC Health Tech Summit audience. Thank you everyone for taking out time today for this session, and over to you, Chintan. Thank you.